So, my name is Drew Coyne, and I am a now like sixth-year teacher, as Rebecca was saying earlier, with the National History Day program. For background, I teach in Westport Public Schools. I've taught at the middle school level at Boytown Middle School in sixth grade. I've also taught at our other middle school, Bedford Middle School, at eighth grade, and now I'm teaching at the high school. I teach a gamut of different classes, ranging from like semester current issues class that I developed at Staples, but I also teach AP Economics, and I also teach U.S. History course, which is where our National History Day curriculum comes in. So just for perspective, what Staples does at least is that part of we have a college prep class, we have a honors class, we have AP U.S. History, all available to our kids in the sophomore year. And so what we do as the differentiator in the sophomore class is for the honors students to all participate in the National History Day program to kind of make that the challenge for them to pursue throughout the year. And we embed it in the curriculum as a whole. And so what I wanted to do was to kind of thank Rebecca, Tony, et cetera, and the NHD team, because they created such a good system last year, and they helped us out for the legacy teachers. Can I see who kind of participated last year? How many people were in the contest? Who are the newbies? Okay, there they are. So what helped last year, especially kind of going through this, was that there was this system and there was this ability to kind of use the National History Day curriculum and projects to kind of guide the students in a really tumultuous year as they go through hybrid learning, back to school, lockdowns, et cetera, whatever it is, they go through all these hard things, and the National History Day curriculum kind of guided them forward throughout the year to provide that kind of continuity that I found. So I was really grateful for that opportunity. And at the end of the year, as I was reflecting to say, this is just such a good program. It's such a well-run machine, and it really helps students learn so much more about a specific area or topic in history. And that I appreciate that as a teacher, to see the happiness, the joy, the learning that's happening, and to kind of watch that in a really tough year. It's just a really nice, happy moment in a really, really tough time for us. And so what I thought was, I was reflecting on this, I was talking to Rebecca, and I was kind of thinking about what were those projects that my students kind of generated last year. And I kind of put 4 of them up on the board for you, just to kind of understand what these sophomores were looking at. And so I had students, as Rebecca said, some of them went to the national level and some did really, really well. This student up here who did a topic on blowing smoke, unmasking the persuasive communication techniques of cigarette advertising in the 20th century, the key to understanding the emergence of regulations. I mean, as a sophomore, as an adult, I'm like, oh my God, this kid is blowing it through the roof right now in communication. I'm just very, very impressed. He won 3rd place at nationals in his exhibit, so I was really, really proud of him. I've never had somebody place at nationals, so that was just a really exciting kind of capstone for the year for him. I also had other students, maybe not proceed, as far in the national contest, but still go, to the state or the national contest, and we're so excited about their project as well. This student, Nikos, did a project on the United Daughters of the Confederacy, something I never knew about, and that kind of provided a spark of, what do I need to learn about this? And he looked at how these Confederate narratives were shaped in school book textbooks in the South post-Civil War, and how he was inspired as we were reading some excerpts from Stamped It from the Beginning and talking with our local leader of Team Westport, our diversity initiative in Westport, to talk about how he was involved with textbook history and research. And they kind of paired up and used this kind of collaborative tool to spark his interest in exploring this topic. A young girl kind of wanted to pursue something about women's studies. And so she looked at Ida Tarbell and kind of looked at this. And now she's in our We the People contest, competing in a constitutional debate program. So she's using the National History Day program as a launch pad of sorts to change and to learn so much more about this. And then I even have one of my students, Jeffrey Pogue. He did Thomas Paine, the most influential man in America, he did Understanding Revolutionary Communication. And I thought he did a performance, a young sophomore boy kind of doing the solo, he did a performance that is brave in high school for kids. And so he must have felt that spark. He must have felt that joy to kind of do this. And he got so into it that I just needed to show you a tiny snippet of what this kid did. He ultimately, I think, placed 4th in the national contest, which was just so exciting for us to see. but you can see he kind of went nuts on this one.
Grammarly helps make your writing clear and concise, no matter where you are. Compose a cover letter.
So I'll just pause it there to see his set of stickers. You know he has gone into the National History Day world cult, if you would call it. But he has gone, this is a sophomore kid, and he did this incredible research project where he went to look at how Thomas Paine communicated to a generation of American revolutionaries. And what he did was to host his scene was, it was so innovative. He's like, I'm going to create a scene where Thomas Paine has just died. I'm like, but you're doing Thomas Paine. It's like, no, this is my idea. This is how I want to communicate it. That he's bringing the four revolutionary leaders who either love him or hate him to a bar to have drinks and talk about Thomas Paine's accomplishments. I was like, okay, we're going to kind of go with the bar scene. That's okay. We'll do this. But as he has his steins in the background, I'm sure he said they were just grape juice. And he just loved it. So he's talking about John Adams and George Washington, their relationship with Thomas Paine, and talking about how they either loved him, hated him, what they still thought his legacy was going to be in the American experiment. And so it's kind of projects like this that you just step back and you appreciate, because it allows students to go so in depth rather than a 1 or 2 week project that you may introduce in for your students. And I love to celebrate these kids because they're so incredible. And so what I recommend in terms of if you want to kind of find those sparks and to find that passion, what a lot of the students said for me was that we loved how you challenged us to find a unique topic, something we didn't necessarily know about, and to connect those to our interests and the strengths, and to play up what we're interested in and let us choose. So not only letting us choose an exhibit versus a website versus a documentary, but letting us choose an area of time or a group of people to explore. And so I wanted to show you some of the arguments that the students were making at the end of the day about last year's theme about communication and history. This is Zach Brody's kind of one of his core takeaways, because he was looking to bridge his kind of, I guess, experience seeing his students grapple with vaping in schools. And he was like, this is such a captivating thing. But he also loves watching TV, and he says he watches so many of these advertisements advertising prescription medications on TV. And he was kind of trying to figure out a way to bridge those two things. And so he kind of settled on this idea of cigarette advertising as a period in American history. And he said the tobacco industry deceived American consumers by using sophisticated advertising and other communication tactics. These communication tactics popularized smoking and mass cigarettes as negative health impacts through much of the 20th century. The exponential rise in sickness and death from the cigarettes remains key to understanding how consumers and today's policymakers must regulate particular industries in the 21st century. And so for a student to kind of take that old lesson from the 1950s, 1960s, and kind of look to say, we need to do things like this today is so important. He even looked at how social media, does the government need to get into the regulation of Facebook, Instagram, as they target teenagers? I'm sure some of you have kids and you're wondering, how are these big tech industries kind of targeting this? He was looking at, it's not just health issues, but it could also be technological issues. I was, again, blown away by this spark that he necessarily found. And then for Nikos, who was looking at the United Daughters Confederacy, he argued at the end of his paper, for me, the significance of the United Daughter Confederacy's communication effort is twofold. First, it adds important context to understand America's current struggle with race, the Confederacy, and its slavery past. Most people know about Jim Crow laws and Confederate monuments, but not about the generations of Southerners who taught in school to venerate the Confederate past. Second, or more broadly, with so much understandable focus on, quote, trusted sources in the internet age, it conversely reminds us all the power of communicating a biased narrative through any widely trusted source, such as a school system. Woo!
Yeah.
You step back and you're like, again, a sophomore is putting these pieces together. And it's by coaching them and giving them nudges and helping them kind of synthesize this. But, as adults, and we step back to say they are making connections through this curriculum that they necessarily wouldn't do with just a textbook. And it really impresses me that he's examining the planting of seeds that this organization, the Southern United Daughters of the Confederacy places in textbooks, and it shapes a generation or generations of people to venerate the Confederacy. It shapes your vision of what America is and what the values we hold. But then he's making that modern day connection, which I try to push all of my students to do, to say, so what? Why does it matter? And he's looking again at that internet age element to say, look at fake news, look at what's available to kind of promote on the internet, and how do we grapple with this, with free speech, but also with the idea of being able to kind of tell the truth at the end of the day. So what I would kind of recommend, and I know you're going to get through all these things today as we grapple with this, but I think, my takeaways to kind of finding that spark for me have been like a core of 5 things. One is starting early if you're new to this, or if you're an expert teacher. The earlier you get started with this and introducing this, the better. So I'll be introducing National History Day in October, and then it's kind of working on it a little bit, letting the kids work on it on their own. Sometimes that doesn't go so well. So you have to stay on them, but doing check-ins along the way. So every kind of quarter, having a 2-week block or 2.5-week block to kind of check in, deep dive with them, push them forward, course correct, etc., has been something good for me. Giving students model examples is huge to help students understand what their peers have done in the past and to knowing what they have to do to also get that spark. And those check-ins, like I mentioned, are really important. Going beyond Google, kids will often say, as they get your topic for this year, debate and diplomacy, they will type in debate and diplomacy and history. You have to push them to go beyond, whether it's local topics, whether it's national topics, important topics. It's something you do probably normally with every project that you introduce. Finding those unique answers is important to getting that spark. Creating an argument, as you saw those other students kind of found their voice in this, and having them embrace that voice is really, really key. And also at the end of the day, celebrate your kids. I love sending out those press releases at the end of the day to get them that newspaper coverage. We used to get those newspapers long ago, Courier Journal in Palmyra, New York. I remember cutting out my name saying, yes, I made it, I'm famous. But they still love it, and to be able to be celebrated for the kids. I know Tony and the NHD team, they came to Staples last year with a bus tour, and that was just a moment for them to get a sign in the yard and celebrate themselves. That kind of builds a community and also builds a spark. The last thing I kind of wanted to wrap up on the student who wrote about Ida Tarbell. I asked her kind of like, what does NHD mean to you as a student? And she reflected on this. She likes to write a lot. So here is her summary of what NHD meant to her. NHD was a unique experience that forced me to truly hone in on one topic, go deep rather than broad, in a time period and narrative in history. Unlike some history lessons where teacher paints a broad, holistic era, NHD forced me to hunt for details and build my own perception of the issue from the ground up, an issue I was sincerely excited about. The process taught me the value of deep diving into primary sources, researching several historical perspectives, and the skill of morphing a large body of research into a precise takeaway. The experience also got me excited about historical research, propelled me to other higher social studies courses. In my experience, NHD was foundational to both my research skills and my love for history and applications. And so I hope that as you see my students kind of express those views and me kind of be a champion of the curriculum, I hope you also feel that spark too. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please.
Did you collaborate with your librarian at all?
We actually, let you know. I'm sorry about that. I have in the past, and last year I didn't know.
Well, last year was a little different. I mean, it was a little wonky last
What I would recommend is I think I'm in also year 6, where I set up those systems. I think I might do this. If you are a new teacher, use as many resources as possible. I will say one of my librarians is Tony that comes in. He comes in and guides and
Totally
coaches the kids. I also we have a literacy coach that I used last year as well in high school. And I also recommend that kids do a lot of primary source interviews. So one part of the project that I require them to do is actually they must conduct an interview. I think it's good for them to get out from behind an email, get out from behind computers, and actually have that face-to-face communication, whether it's via Zoom or in person. That is actually a thing that I think kind of also creates a resource. One thing that we've done in the past, in 2 previous years, we also use the Westport Public Library. So I think because of COVID blowing up systems, it wasn't as easy as last year, since the library was also shut down, had modified hours, and there were staffing issues. But yes, I would say if you need help on this, don't do it alone, use a library.
And
Yes.
just for logistical issues, my apologies to people in Zoom land. It is a little hard to see the screen. Will we at some point, will people just send links to their presentations?
sure.
Yeah.
we'll be happy to
So
do
you
that.
will all get to
Yeah.
get a copy of the presentation. So apologies there.
Sure. Happy to answer any other questions too, if there are any others. Yes, please.
Are you the only one in your building that participates in National History Day? Are there other teachers?
Good question. So last year I had 3 sections, so I had almost 80 kids doing this. And that's a tough thing. So
80.
it's a lot. So I had 80 students. I'm often pushing them to work in groups, not just have 80 individual projects. So as new teachers, groups are wonderful things. I would cap it around like 3, maybe 4 students. Otherwise, then you start to get the 2 or 3 that work really well, and then the others that glide along as you've never experienced in other group projects. I also said another thing, just as a clarification, I always say once you choose your group, you are choosing that grade at the end. So it is a way to kind of say, like, when you complain, oh, this person didn't do this person, but you chose the group. So that's a good way to avoid conflict at the end of the day, because I know no kids are worried about grades. At the high school, we have 3 other teachers, so 4 of us at the high school, and then we are implementing it. And I see some 7th grade teachers from Westport around the room. They will be doing now a junior level contest at
good
the
idea.
middle school level. So we're creating an entire ecosystem of National History Day and Staples High School.
That's what we need.
So I know, indoctrination. Any other questions, or does that make sense?
Yeah, no, but I was just wondering because
Mhm.
in all the schools I've ever worked at, I was pretty much the only one.
Uh-huh.
It's,
So,
it takes some effort, and, I think, there are a couple folks, along with Drew, Tina, your school does it, multiple, are there other, schools out there?
6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade.
Yep, so there are some folks out there. It sometimes is hard getting your colleagues to buy in because there's a view that it's a lot of extra work, and it is in some ways. But the thing about History Day is that it's skill building and it's teaching students to think. And again, from my perspective as now an experienced read old coordinator, is that I hear from students and they tell me how the only thing that really prepared them for college was History Day.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm super excited for Westport to have that middle school and high school, because the other thing I've seen with History Day, and I was one of these nerdy kids, so I can really relate to these students, is that for some kids, they're not into sports. They're not into the usual high school stuff. And History Day gives them a voice, like some of the quotes you were reading, that we've seen students who've gone on. And actually, we had one of our students who interned with National History Day. She's a history major at the University of Maryland because she got a scholarship from National History Day to go. So, it gives students an opportunity that maybe they haven't found their niche, and History Day is kind of giving them that voice to really find it, which is very exciting. Well,
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you guys soon.